Dr. Jiang is pregnant with his enemy's cub. Author, Gourd Sauce Copywriting. As we all know, there are two deputy chief physicians in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology of Jiwa Hospital affiliated to a medical university. Jiang Su and Shen Fengyu, from the freshman admission to the doctoral graduation and then to the professional title evaluation, are fighting to the death and the sky is dark. It can be said that if you don't kill me, I will kill you. You get 96 in the exam, and I get 97 in the exam. At the end of the scroll, even the girl he fell in love with was the same. Who would have thought that before the two of them had a fight, the sweetheart directly took the hand of his girlfriend of the same and came out of the closet smiling in front of them. The two straight men who had been facing each other in vain for 3 months had their three views completely shattered, and they had a bitter drink in their throats with the same enemy, and rolled into bed in a daze. Afterwards, Jiang Su got up with his back that was almost falling apart, his mentality exploded for half a minute, and he resolutely decided to forget about it. Until 3 months later, he leaned on the disappearing abdominal muscles, looked at the urine test report, and looked at himself in the mirror in disbelief. Vomit. The first showdown. Shen Fengyu touched Jiang Su's forehead. You don't have a fever, is today April Fool's Day? His face was then swollen for 7 days. Calculated due date for the first time. Shen Fengyu couldn't help laughing. Good guy, this child's due date is actually on April Fool's Day. Jiang Su looked indifferent. This can only show that the meeting between you and me is like a joke. April Fool's Day. The heavy smell of alcohol hit his face. Jiang Su said irritably, can you do it? Dr. Shen said as usual, don't be afraid, I promise you with my many years of professional career, if you don't get off the operating table alive, I will buy you a cemetery with money. Jiang Su began. Who is so afraid of? The oxygen mask was buckled on Jiang Su's face, blocking his voice. I can't kiss you now, but I will always be with you. The sharp scalpel sliced open the lover's body layer by layer, and when he raised his eyes again, the carefree Dr. Shen saw nothing but confessed love. Even though this kid was born on April Fool's Day, trust me, I'm not here to be funny. Dr. Jiang, Shen Fengyu said, I love you. Edible Guide, 1. Su Shuangtian, He, Shuangjia. 2. Continuous Iceberg Rage, Intermittent Queen Shao times Continuous Sand Sculpture Actor, Intermittent Loyal Dog Attack. 3. Written to Relax, Sweet Pet, Career Line is Cool. 4. People with a medical background should be cautious, excessive research should be cautious, and excessive pursuit of logic should be cautious. After all, no matter how I quote the scriptures to make the matter of having a child reasonable, it is not reasonable in nature. 5. The timeline of the main text is only up to production, and there will not be many children in the episode, Lei Meng learned from herself. 6. The background is overhead, overhead, overhead. Say important things 3 times. The relevant systems of hospitals in the text refer to our country to a certain extent, but they will be modified for the plot, so please understand it as a parallel universe. Please do not cheat, you are right. Content tags, Johnson & Johnson Industry Elite Suite articles. Search keywords, protagonist, Jiang Su, Shen Fengyu supporting role, others, 1 sentence introduction, doctors don't heal themselves, but let the cub's father come to heal. Conception, unity, friendship, and courage to face setbacks and build a better future. Comment on the work. There are 2 deputy chief physicians in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology of a medical university. Jiang Su and Shen Fengyu have been competing for many years, but they did not expect to become pregnant unexpectedly because of a drunken accident. Facing the unprecedented challenge of male pregnancy, the 2 rivals put aside their grievances for the time being and searched for a solution while working together. During their long-term relationship, a spark of love burst out unexpectedly. The writing style of this article is smooth, humorous, full of characters, and the plot is full of ups and downs. It not only has hilarious moments, but also touches people's hearts in a warm place. Well said, it's worth reading. Jiwa Hospital affiliated to Medical University. Before 8 o'clock, the early summer sun was already dazzling, shining in through the transparent windows, reflecting the spotless corridors refreshingly and cleanly. Two groups of attending doctors, resident doctors, Gui Paisheng, and graduate students stood on both sides of the corridor clearly, and the faint smell of disinfectant was particularly clear. In Dr. No 2's office, Jiang put down his teacup, put on the white coat on the back of the chair, and picked up a thick stack of documents from the neatly tidied table. There are black, blue, and red fountain pens in it. At the farthest station from him, Shen Fengyu took 2 sips of coffee in a hurry. The dark blue folder was tucked under his arm. He took out a black pen. "Thank you, brother Ha." Why the innocent colleague who was victimized failed to use Erkang's hand to summon Shen Fengyu back. Jiang slightly lowered his head and looked at Shen Fengyu, who squeezed in front of him, holding the doorknob with one hand. "I'm sorry, Dr. Jiang, let's take a step first." A handsome face smiled a little naughty. He opened the door foolishly, and snapped his fingers at a row of students on the left. "Let's go." The resident doctor on the right, Yu Sang, made an international friendly gesture to him the moment he turned around, and Jiang, who was dressed meticulously, pushed the door and came out. He adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose, and walked like the wind, taking folders while walking. Hang Kong clicked on a student at the end on the right. "In the future, if there is anyone who can't even button up a white coat, just get lost and go to Shen Fengyu's group." The student suddenly found that his buttons were not in place. As a well-known teaching hospital, Jiwa Hospital affiliated to Medical University has a large number of patients and various types of doctors. The Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology is mainly composed of multiple medical groups. And graduate students follow the pyramid structure of learning. Generally speaking, the daily ward rounds are mainly completed by the attending physician and the resident doctor. The chief and deputy chief physicians conduct teaching rounds twice a week. However, as young doctors who have just hired the deputy chief physician, Jiang, and Shen Fengyu, almost there will be a big rounds the next day. Both of them graduated from the 8-year undergraduate and doctoral program of a medical university. Since they were freshmen, they have been entangled in the first and second positions. Either the east wind overwhelms the west wind, or the west wind overwhelms the east wind. During their doctoral period, the two worked together, entered Jiwa Hospital affiliated to a medical university, and after the rotation was over, Ngiala was narrow, and entered the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology together, and worshipped under the guidance of Professor Kui, the director of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. This Professor Kui is a kind-hearted middle-aged woman. She is also the vice president of Jiwa Hospital. Professor Kui's office. Jiang, with me without him, with him without me. Shen Fengyu, I'm starving to death, jumping from here, I won't work with Jiang either. However, Professor Kui just looked at the two with a smile, holding the thermos cup and whispering softly, "The system has already been entered, and it cannot be changed. If there is any feud that cannot be resolved overnight, young man, take a step back. Come on, give me a hug." Hand. Jiang and Shen Fengyu obviously couldn't shake hands. They looked at each other, let out a cold snort and walked away. So in the days that followed, Professor Kui happily watched the two friends doing scientific research in the laboratory, rushing to apply for surgery with her as if they would never be tired, or hugging each other at the case analysis meeting. There is a thick stack of documents and materials, and the verbal battle can't make the other party have nothing to say. This month Jiang handed in a paper, and next month Shen Fengyu will definitely contact her to revise the manuscript. Others are the moon and I will not sleep, and these two people will not sleep if the other party does not sleep. Staying up all night has become commonplace. The corresponding author, Professor Kui, took the bonus softly. After enjoying the pleasure of being led away by the students to a certain extent, the biggest winner with venomous eyes looked at the two with satisfaction, and said leisurely, "Young people are motivated only when they have competition. In the end, under the high-intensity competition that if you don't kill me, I will kill you. The two were hired as deputy chief physicians in the same year. Since then, they have become two young and sharp swords in the obstetrics and gynecology department of Jiwa Hospital. However, the rapid progress in their careers has not changed the situation that the two are incompatible. It has become the daily practice of the two doctors to compete in everything. Jiang, you are going too far. Shen Fengyu looked at the operating table schedule handed over by the head nurse. The first operating table next Tuesday is already yours, and you still occupy so many seats. Do you want to arrange 6 operating tables in one morning? Did it all? The stage jumping is not as good as yours. Are you planning to let me stay in the hospital tonight and stay off work? The operating room of the hospital is limited, and generally the operation with high grade and high degree of difficulty will be arranged first, that is, the first operation, and the first operation is usually arranged step by step, so there is not much controversy. The operation after the first operation is called receiving the operation. At this time, it depends on the qualifications and the relationship with the head nurse to grab it. No one wants to be in the hospital for surgery in the middle of the night, so the operating table has always been a battleground for military strategists. Jiang and Shen Fengyu usually advance and retreat with others, and give in to each other. Only when these two meet each other, they can't wait to fight to the death. What's wrong with me jumping off the platform? I'm fast. Jiang didn't look at him at all, and lowered his head to sign the schedule. The thin lenses reflected the cold white light in the corridor. Generally, an operation is not performed by a single doctor. Usually, the chief surgeon only completes the most critical part, and the previous skin preparation and subsequent sutures are handed over to younger doctors. There are many patients in Jiwa Hospital, and the chief surgeon has too many operations. It is common to leave and rush to the next operating room after finishing the critical part, which is also called platform jumping. With a snap, Shen Fengyu patted a beauty card on the table, softened his voice and said to the head nurse, "Sister Jiang, look at Jiang, he is too domineering, please do me a favor, rearrange, give it a go. He is good looking, has a sweet mouth, can act coquettishly and coax people, and has a pair of fan-shaped peach blossom eyes. Favorite look for little girls. Sister Jiang, my mother has been doing it in this beauty shop. The effect is very good. You are already good looking. If you go for maintenance, you will definitely be 10 years younger. There is no woman who does not like to be praised for her beauty." Zhang Feng, the head nurse, was coaxed into elation by him, but there was still a shopping card Jiang gave her in her pocket. He persuaded and said, "Dr. Jiang, why don't you give in?" In fact, on weekdays, the two of them didn't compete so fiercely for the stage, and they didn't know what was going to happen to the two of them next Tuesday, so they rushed to finish the operation as if they were rushing to reincarnate. Jiang gave Shen Fengyu a cold look, "Don't even think about it." "Jiang," Shen Fengyu held up his pen, "next time you and Zhonglan have surgery together, I will definitely not come to make trouble." Zhonglan is an attending physician in the same department. She can be regarded as the junior sister of these two people, and it is also one of the fuses that made the relationship between Jiang and Shen Fengyu worse. They are both chasing Zhonglan. The rival in love was extremely jealous when they met, not to mention that the two of them were at odds with each other. Every time Zhonglan helped Jiang, as long as Shen Fengyu was not too busy to leave, he would definitely go to Jiang's operating room and hang around twice to hinder him eyes. Some doctors like to chat during the operation, and some doctors even play music in the operating room to tell jokes. Shen Fengyu talks a lot and can be funny. Unlike Jiang's quiet and dull operation, Zhonglan quite likes him to be active atmosphere. Jiang's gaze slowly shifted from the pressed pen to Shen Fengyu's annoying face. "Deal." On Tuesday, Jiangsu left the operating room and glanced at the electronic clock hanging on the wall. "Very good, I can leave work on time today." He drank the coke handed over by his assistant in a few sips and threw it into the trash can. then went to the dressing room to change into his regular clothes. Today he deliberately brought a pressed white shirt and black trousers, buttoned up to the top one, and tied his tie. A discordant figure suddenly appeared. "Hey, Dr. Jiang, are you dressed so formally today?" Shen Fengyu was wearing a black, white, and blue vertically striped silk shirt with 2 buttons unbuttoned. The hem of the shirt was tucked into his trousers leisurely, the hair on his forehead was brushed up. It looks very dazzling. He raised Jiang Su's tie frivolously. "Why go?" Jiang Su pulled back his tie, rearranged himself in front of the mirror. His face was written as if he was too lazy to talk to him. Shen Fengyu hugged his elbows, leaned against the wall and admired him wearing a tie, and asked, "Do you know why I robbed you of the operating table that day?" Jiang Su didn't care at all what Shen Fengyu wanted to do, he only knew that he grabbed the table because Zhonglan invited him to have dinner tonight, so he specially wore a formal suit to the date. Shen Fengyu went out with him, his face full of provocation. "So what if you have the surgery with Zhonglan? Anyway, she chose me in the end," he said. "To be honest, Zhonglan invited me to dinner today." "Oh, no wonder it's dressed like a peacock in heat." Etc. Jiang Su suddenly looked at Shen Fengyu without a word. "What did you just say?" "Zhonglan asked me to have dinner," Shen Fengyu said tauntingly. "Don't be envious, Dr. Jiang, your fate is yet to come." After a moment of silence, Jiang Su said, "She also asked me out." Watching Shen Fengyu's flamboyance become stiffer and stiffer, Jiang Su sneered and said, "I'm just pretending to be passionate." "Damn it," Shen Fengyu was dumbfounded. "Why did she ask you out? What did she like about you, cleanliness or frigidity?" "You are cold-tempered," Jiang Su said. "It's like you can open your screen with a tail inserted, and only those who are blind will fall in love with you. You two, stop arguing." A gentle and pleasant female voice interrupted the quarrel between the two. Dr. Zhong stood in front of an off-road vehicle and awkwardly raised his hand to signal the two to calm down. "Get in the car." The 2 deputy chief physicians who were fighting just now changed to polite expressions in an instant, and nodded and smiled at Zhonglan at the same time. "Thank you for your hard work." The off-road vehicle is very big, and the back seat is extraordinarily spacious. However, the 2 doctors sat comfortably, and at least a big man with a round belly could fit in between them. They all looked out the window, as if they were breathing the air exhaled by each other. "Can kill them." Zhonglan sighed. She didn't want to get involved in the grievances between these 2 people at all. After much deliberation, the best way to refuse was to confess directly. So in the gorgeously decorated restaurant, Jiang Su and Shen Fengyu saw another neat woman with a high ponytail. She took Zhonglan's hand familiarly and said to the 2 doctors, "I heard that you 2 have been taking good care of us in the department, Lan. Lan, I have always been very grateful to you." "You're welcome, I should do everything." Shen Fengyu naturally thought of Gao Ponytail as Zhonglan's friend, and smiled at her. "We take care of each other." Jiang Su glanced at Shen Fengyu who had finished his sentence, and finally just smiled politely at Gao Ponytail. "Hello." Gao Maiyai took the reactions of the 2 doctors into his eyes, and smiled at Zhonglan inexplicably, and then she raised her glass. "So, as her girlfriend, I specially invite the 2 of you to have a light meal today to express my gratitude." Jiang Su and Shen Fengyu. "This is not a simple meal, this is a hungmen banquet to declare sovereignty." The 2 who had been arguing just now instantly understood why Zhonglan invited them to dinner at the same time. Jiang Su and Shen Fengyu looked at each other, and at the same time turned their heads with a tss. Jiang Su does not discriminate against homosexuals, but he is still a little depressed when he hears the news. These years, because of rivalry with Shen Fengyu, he was so busy that he didn't even touch the ground, and he didn't have time to date at all. It wasn't until the family urged him to get married that he couldn't hold it anymore, so he thought of looking for a partner. Zhonglan has a good personality and is close to her. Jiang Su has always had a good impression of her, so he chose to pursue Zhonglan without hesitation. Unexpectedly, at almost the same time, Shen Fengyu also publicly expressed his desire to pursue Zhonglan. Seriously, she had been a rival in love for a month, but she didn't expect that Zhonglan already had a relationship, and the two of them didn't even pass the gender barrier. Jiangsu's last meal was steamed buns in the morning, and he drank a pack of milk in the middle of the surgery. As a result, the ideal candlelight dinner was very different from the reality. He felt hungry, but at the same time, he felt that the food in front of him was tasteless. After a meal with each other's ulterior motives, Zhonglan's girlfriend wanted to pay the bill, so Jiangsu stopped him. It has become his habit to take the initiative to pay when eating with girls, but before Zhonglan can refute, Shen Fengyu had already settled the bill before him. That's right, it all needs to be rolled. Jiangsu silently rolled his eyes at him, and the four of them parted at the entrance of the restaurant. Seeing Zhonglan and Gao Ponytail walking away sweetly, the two big men who had been rejected had nothing to say, their faces full of gloom. In the end, Jiangsu took a deep breath, adjusted his mood and prepared to take a taxi home. After all, the first show would start tomorrow morning, but Shen Fengyu suddenly reached out to him. Holding the mobile phone in his hand, Jiangsu glanced at him inexplicably, and the latter said without changing his face, "I only invite girls to dinner, and the meal is paid. Is your face made of a city wall?" Jiangsu looked at Shen Fengyu in disbelief, wishing he could dissect his face to see if it was twice as thick as an ordinary person. "It's fine if you don't pay, you can buy me a drink." Shen Fengyu pointed to a bar next to the restaurant. "I'm upset." Jiangsu turned his gaze back to the phone. "I'm also upset." "Then just go together." After finishing speaking, Shen Fengyu didn't care about Jiangsu's rejection, so he put one hand around Jiangsu's neck and led him to the shop in front of him. Jiangsu patted Shen Fengyu's hand away in disgust, and when he raised his head, his eyes met the words Hell Bar. There are 4 characters in total, none of which has a complete lamp, and the word prison is still half hanging at an angle. Jiangsu is afraid that one day there will be a gust of wind, and the emergency department of their hospital will need more cases. The colorful lights on that word are even more eye-catching. Fluorescent green and fluorescent powder are intertwined, as if the boss of the red light district will come out to solicit customers in the next second. "Is this a decent place?" Jiangsu stepped back. Shen Fengyu also took a look at the words, and said seriously, "This is not very beautiful, the color is so bright." Jiangsu glanced at him lightly, and a question flashed in his heart. As for Shen Fengyu's aesthetics, how did he make himself look like a dog every day? The bartender at the door had already noticed the 2 people chattering at the door, and when he saw that the situation was not right, he hurried out and said, "You 2 handsome guys are here to play. Our bar is only 100 miles away. There is no other place to drink after passing here." "Yes, there is a 10% discount on all drinks today." Jiangsu suddenly raised his foot forward. "So you were persuaded?" Shen Fengyu said unexpectedly, "Dr. Jiang is so short of money." Jiangsu said to him without turning his head, "Because you are only worthy of a 10% discount." Shen Fengyu, damn! Fortunately, the Hell Bar is not as outrageous as its coquettish and cheap signboard. It is just an ordinary bar with booths and private rooms. Anyway, with the 10% discount, Shen Fengyu ordered according to the drink list, and directly filled the table between the 2 of them. Jiangsu folded his arms and sat opposite Shen Fengyu, wearing a tie, as if he was about to go to the court to negotiate in the next second. Shen Fengyu stood up and sat next to Jiangsu. "Let's drink together, you're welcome." Jiangsu turned his head to avoid him, and didn't want to give any extra eyes to the colorful wine on the table. Suddenly, a man in a floral shirt came over, put one hand on the back of the sofa, and toasted the 2 of them. "Handsome guy, would you like to have a drink together?" Shen Fengyu said directly, "I don't want to." "I didn't ask you again." The man looked past Shen Fengyu and said to Jiangsu, "Handsome guy, you are the man I like the most in the bar today." And finally stopped at the collar of his tightly buttoned shirt. "The button is so high, isn't it hot? Shen Fengyu directly leaned forward to block his gaze. I want you to take care of it. The man raised his eyebrows when he heard the words. Seeing that Jiang Su didn't answer, his eyes became more provocative towards Shen Fengyu. After a while, he turned to Jiang Su again. Honey, why don't you go to my table? Who the is your honey? Shen Fengyu had goosebumps all over his body when he said it. We are both straight men, please respect yourself. Who are you? The man who was interrupted for the third time to strike up a conversation was finally angry, and his tired tone of forceful pinching finally became normal. He didn't say anything. You are here saying one sentence after another. I said if you weren't his boyfriend, you should hurry up and go to the other side. Shen Fengyu raised his legs. I'm his love rival and competitor, and I'm looking for him to seek revenge. Is there a problem? The man looked at Jiang Su in disbelief, and the latter nodded. He's right. The man belatedly sensed the tense atmosphere. He was silent for a moment, raised his hand, rubbed the soles of his feet and said, Excuse me, you guys continue. Seeing him carrying the wine and walking towards the next target, Shen Fengyu glanced at Jiang Su triumphantly. I am simply too kind to help you stop drinking with kindness. I must be one of the top 10 people who moved the affiliated hospital this year. Jiang Su directly picked up the wine and poured it on his face. You can't afford it, Jiang Su. Shen Fengyu wiped his face, then suddenly grabbed Jiang Su's shoulder and pulled him in front of him. Jiang Su wrinkled his nose and looked at the man who suddenly approached him in front of him. The smell of alcohol hit his face, and he turned his head subconsciously. Shen Fengyu seemed to have discovered something. You can't drink. He smiled and let go of Jiang Su, with an arrogant expression on his face. You can't, Jiang Su. Hearing this, Jiang Su glanced at him indifferently, and directly picked up the wine glass closest to him. The Adam's apple on his upturned neck rolled, and the liquid in the wine glass was drained in one gulp, leaving only the empty glass. The man's eyes were fixed on Shen Fengyu the whole time. Even through a layer of glasses, he could feel the sharpness and disdain in his eyes. Okay, you're not convinced, are you? Shen Fengyu glanced at him, and after a while, he also picked up the wine in his hand and drank it down in one gulp, knocking the wine glass in front of Jiang Su. His eyes were full of provocation. Jiang Su didn't even look at his hand. He picked up another glass of wine, and took 3 gulps in front of Shen Fengyu. The short-term peace caused by falling out of love at the same time collapsed in an instant, and the desire for competition in the bones was on the verge of breaking out. The two of them took one glass after another, and the speed of getting the wine became faster and faster, until finally snapped. There was only an untouched glass of wine left on the table, and the former rivals stared at each other with scarlet eyes, holding each other's hand tightly, and no one let the other pick up the last glass of wine. It wasn't until the two of them drank the glass of wine together almost head to mouth that Jiang Su suddenly realized what he had just done. Fuck! This damned desire to win! His mind was like a ball of paste, and his face was scorched. He loosened his tie and shook his drowsy head. Sleepiness swept over his mind. He watched Shen Fengyu's head turn into 2, turned into 3, and finally back to 1. Then his eyes darkened and he passed out. When he woke up again, he was inexplicably lying on the big bed in the hotel. The author has something to say, Jiang Su's eternal weakness, Shen Fengyu's aggressive method. There was something furry against Jiang Su's chest, and he pushed it irritably, only to hear Shen Fengyu humming a few times. You usually look thin, but when you lift it, why is it so heavy? You're fucking, he's heavy. Jiang Su pushed his head up, and under the influence of alcohol, the two of them even talked intermittently. You can't, Jiang Su, Shen Fengyu spread out on the pillow, swinging his arms to the side of the bed. You only drank a little, you got drunk, no wonder Zhonglan has a crush on you. Jiang Su was very dizzy. When he heard the words, he slapped Shen Fengyu on the face and covered his mouth. Your face was so hot that you could boil an egg. Do you think you're not drunk? I'm not drunk. The drunk waved his hand. I won't pour 1,000 cups. Su Shi was drunk, and Jiang Su talked more. Hearing this, he let out a squeak. It doesn't matter if you don't pour 1,000 cups or just 1 cup, anyway, Zhonglan doesn't like you. Shen Fengyu, who was murdered, rubbed his face. Zhonglan. He muttered, as if he was caught in some memory. I suddenly remembered, Jiang Su. I am because of you, Lian Banhua confessed to me back then. They all declined. You thought, you were the only one suffering, Jiang Su said. When I graduated, I received dozens of love letters just to have with you. I didn't even have time to open them. So why on earth are you flirting with me? Why don't you ask yourself? The two men who had been living and dying so far became more and more angry. Under the blessing of alcohol, they didn't know who made the move first, and suddenly they wrestled into a ball, wishing they could send each other to Zishan directly. Fortunately, his mind was not so clear, and his eyes could not see clearly. 9 times out of 10, he missed the right position. After being tired for a long time, Jiang Su's tie had already been torn loose, and the button did not know where it fell, revealing a piece of cold white neck. He leaned against the head of the bed and pressed the bridge of his nose repeatedly. Shen Fengyu, who had punched for a long time, collapsed on the bed with his eyes closed, panting. After a while, he seemed to sigh with emotion. Emotions are really metaphysics. I never thought about it. Zhonglan is gay. He closed his eyes, probably because he felt that the overhead light of the hotel was too dazzling, and he turned it off with a snap sound. As for the headlights, only 2 warm yellow sleep lamps by the bed are left. He turned his head to look at Jiang Su, and suddenly remembered the man in the bar just now. I said, you are also gay, right? With a punch in the lower abdomen, Jiang Su broke his joints, half raised his eyelids, and gave him a cold look. I'm 1.88 meters, even if I'm gay, I'm still one. He was so drunk that he didn't even know what he was talking about. If he sobered up, he would realize that he had been led into a pit by Shen Fengyu's nonsense. Fortunately, Shen Fengyu was also half asleep and half awake, and didn't find any huge loopholes in his words. Instead, he grasped the numbers sensitively, and subconsciously said, I'm 1.88.4 meters tall. Jiang Su, I'm 1.88.43 meters. Who doesn't know how to count decimals? Ha! Shen Fengyu suddenly laughed, I'm 1.88.44 meters. Damn! Jiang Su glared at him, but Shen Fengyu got more and more upward. Not only am I taller than you, believe it or not, I'm also taller than you in everything. I do not believe. The sense of victory and defeat among men seems to be engraved in the DNA, especially under the blessing of alcohol. The mind is completely swallowed up by inattention. Shen Fengyu immediately took off his trousers, and reached out to pull Jiang Su's trousers. The tailored trousers wrapped the man's slender legs, which was very pleasing to the eye. Jiang Su was probably really drunk, and his mind was full of not being able to lose to Shen Fengyu, so he let his pants be pulled down. The two looked down at the same time, and looked at each other again, almost speaking in unison said, I am longer than you. Impossible. Shen Fengyu directly pulled Jiang Su's hand, and pressed on himself, compare yourself with your hands. Jiang Su's hands are very white, with slender fingers and a little callus. Because there is no flesh, you can still see the light blue blood vessels on the back of the hand. Probably because of the alcohol, his blood went to his head, but his hands were a little cold. The moment he touched Shen Fengyu, the latter trembled suddenly. Don't move. Jiang Su's mind only had a single-threaded test of length. His hand rubbed against a certain position of Shen Fengyu. Shen Fengyu lowered his head in a daze. The visual stimulation made his brain a little bit dazed. Those hands, which are always performing operations in an orderly manner, were jumping and rubbing on his body, and his heart started beating wildly for no reason. What are you fluttering about? While he disliked his heart that had never seen the world, he groped to grab Jiang Su's hand. The latter was interrupted halfway and looked up at him unhappily. Obscure in front of the eyes. Only then did Shen Fengyu realize that Jiang Su's glasses had been knocked off at some point. Jiang Su has inner double eyes, perhaps because of myopia. He took off his glasses to see things a bit blurry, those eyes that always look sharp under the lenses. At this time, under the background of the warm yellow sleep light, there is a bit of natural softness. This kind of Jiang Su made Shen Fengyu feel strange. Alcohol made Shen Fengyu's body and brain feel light, like stepping on clouds, and like in a dream. Shen Fengyu stared blankly at Jiang Su for a while, and suddenly found a small mole under his eye. The mole was very small, usually blocked by his glasses. He had never noticed it, but now that he suddenly noticed it, Shen Fengyu stared at it like an addiction, and couldn't move his eyes away. Inexplicably, Shen Fengyu felt that the mole was a bit seductive. Jiang Su's face was that kind of cold white, with a little black spot that was very clear against it. He was dazzled by the mole, and when his Adam's apple rolled, he suddenly forgot who was lying on the bed. So in the next second, Shen Fengyu's lower lip accidentally stuck the little mole on. Jiang Su's eyelashes trembled, his eyes were half closed, he seemed a little dazed, his consciousness was fuzzy, and after a moment of confusion, he turned his head away. Shen Fengyu put one hand on the pillow and looked down at Jiang Su. The moment he tilted his head, Shen Fengyu keenly noticed that there was also a small mole on his neck. My mother said that people who are white are more likely to get moles, which is true. After speaking, he bowed his head and kissed like a mole collector. Shen Fengyu's lips were very cold, and when they suddenly touched his hot neck, Jiang Su raised his head subconsciously. His jawline was very beautiful, and it was very clear because he raised his head. Shen Fengyu wanted to go down, but Jiang Su put his hands on his chest. Hot! Jiang Su closed his eyes, rubbed the pure white pillow out of its wrinkles, and said bluntly, "Go and turn on the air conditioner." After obediently turning on the air conditioner and returning, Shen Fengyu propped his head on one hand, looking down at Jiang Su who was lying on his back. The two of them were tossing and turning on the bed just now, and Jiang Su's shirt had already been rolled up from his waist. The Jiang Su in the dream is still cute, Shen Fengyu thought, not noisy, although it looks unreal under the warm yellow light, but it is very pleasing to the eye. Shen Fengyu's eyes flicked over that smooth and thin waist, and he tore off the few buttons left. Because he hadn't been exposed to the sun, the skin on Jiang Su's chest was extremely white. Of a mole. Different from the previous ones, this mole is red, like a drop of blood hidden in it, red and shiny. Collective Dr. Shen stared at it for a long time, then rubbed his eyes, feeling inexplicably panicked. He raised a finger and pressed the little red dot like a switch, and suddenly there was an indistinct gasp above his head. Shen Fengyu's spirit was numb. Fuck, don't recruit me. He took a deep breath, and wanted to stand up. Jiang Su also realized something in a trance, but felt that he was very annoyed, so he kicked Shen Fengyu hard, "Get out." However, he kicked in the air, and when Shen Fengyu dodged the attack, he grabbed his ankle. Jiang Su's ankles were very thin and his skin was smooth, Shen Fengyu couldn't help rubbing them for a while longer. There was another low muffled grunt. It's different from the one in the small movie, the man's voice is a little hoarse, a little cold, indifferent, but inexplicably ignited. Shen Fengyu suddenly lowered his head and looked at the ends of those legs with dim eyes. This dream is too violent. The author has something to say, Shen Fengyu, I vow to visit every mole on Jiang Su's body. Jiang Su was woken up by a phone call. He always used to put the phone by his pillow before going to bed, so that he could answer it as soon as he had something to do. Hello. As soon as he uttered his voice, Jiang Su was startled by his own voice. His voice was so hoarse, he didn't know if it was because of the hangover and lack of water, but it still hurt a little. It's Xiaoxu, I'm my aunt. Jiang Su thought for a while, his mother is an only child, he probably doesn't have an aunt, and was about to speak, when the other side explained, "It's the second cousin of your mother's neighbor and the cousin of his brother-in-law." Oh! Since becoming a doctor, Jiang felt that his relatives, acquaintances, and friends had at least doubled. Jiang rubbed the center of his brows, inexplicably feeling a little sore in his arms, as if he had lifted weights all night last night. "What's the matter, auntie?" He coughed twice, but his throat still felt uncomfortable. "That's right, it's your sister Lily. I told your mother before that she will give birth in 2 or 3 months. Would you like to ask you to deliver her?" "Jiang, I don't know how to deliver babies." "Oh, you are a doctor in obstetrics and gynecology. I heard from your mother that you are still the director, so let's just say that. Come to my aunt's house for dinner on weekends." Normally, Jiang might explain, but today, he was so tired that he didn't want to say a word, so he gave an extremely perfunctory planning to ask his mother what's going on later. Many people have some misunderstandings about obstetricians and gynecologists, thinking that they are the main force in delivering babies. However, in fact, for most of the mothers who are in good health and have a smooth labor process, there may be no doctors to help them from entering the delivery room to leaving the hospital. The simple natural delivery process is mainly led by midwives. Only when the delivery process is not smooth, bleeding, or rescue, in short, when various unexpected emergencies occur, the doctor will urgently participate in the delivery process and decide whether to send the mother to the operating room, do emergency surgery. As for what was sent to Jiang, there was a high probability that it was not a million critical illness, but also a caesarean section in a difficult situation. It's like there are always some patients who hope to get the attention of doctors, but in fact, when a bunch of directors and deputy directors are around you every day, it probably means that your illness is not easy to treat. So for this sister Lily, Jiang's best blessing to her is to pray that she will never meet him at all. After hanging up the phone, he felt extremely tired for no reason. He lazily put the hand holding the phone on the bed, and with a snap, he hit something furry on the back of his hand. He suddenly opened his eyes, and saw a head under his hand. Some messy memories flooded into his mind belatedly. He frowned for a while, racking his brains to think about what he did last night. It seemed that he had a meal and was rejected by Zhonglan, and then what? Then he went to the bar with Shen Fangyu. Jiang's eyes suddenly panicked. He carefully pinched the quilt around the head, gently pulled it up, and took a look. Hold! It's really Shen Fangyu. He was so angry that he kicked Shen Fangyu out of the bed, including half of the quilt. He didn't know why Shen Fangyu's sleep quality was so good, and he didn't wake up even after falling out of bed. As a result of kicking, Jiang gasped. The bones all over his body seemed to be torn off one by one and then glued together. The pain made him frown, especially a certain extremely delicate place was a little tingling due to the pulling of the muscles. What did you do last night? He wouldn't fight with Shen Fangyu all night, right? He shook his head, trying to think of something, and then some broken and unsuitable images suddenly squeezed into his mind. Jiang's eyes widened suddenly, and after a while, he stiffened his neck and lowered his head to take a look. When you and your deadly enemy wake up in the same bed, your chest and inner thighs are covered with hickey marks and bruised handprints, and there is a strange pain behind you, what is the most likely thing that happened between you? A. You are asleep. B. You are asleep. C. You are asleep. Jiang's face was livid. I choose D. D. You are sleeping. You sir. Jiang silently glanced at Shen Fangyu on the ground. Half of the man's body was exposed. It was a very beautiful body with a standard figure, no excess fat, neat muscles, clear bones, and clear blood vessels. Very suitable as a model for teaching anatomy classes. Jiang even felt that he had already figured out where to start the knife. After silently reciting the core values of socialism 10 times, Dr. Jiang, who had bruised veins, resisted the urge to kill and dismember his body. The bed after spending the whole night was a mess, the sheets were wrinkled, The pillows were thrown everywhere, the clothes were scattered on the ground, the white shirt had long been wrinkled into pickles, everything on the scene seemed to prove how absurd and presumptuous it was last night. Jiang Su took a deep breath and decided to leave this place of right and wrong earlier, lest the core socialist values would not be useful. He has never put on his clothes so neatly, showered, washed and ironed his shirt in one go. When he looked in the mirror again, Jiang Su was still the meticulously dressed Dr. Jiang, calm, self-possessed, and gentle. Just around the neck, something seems to be missing. Jiang Su's eyes fell on the black tie that was thrown aside. He bought that tie newly and wore it for the first time yesterday. However, the moment he reached out to touch the tie, a certain lively scene suddenly flashed in his mind. Some idiot tied his hand with this tie and pushed it to the top of his head. Some people are alive, he is dead. With a sound of tearing, the unlucky tie that died before leaving the school was torn in two, and the ruthless Jiang Su threw it into the trash can in the hotel lobby without looking back. He still has the first one to operate in the morning, which is ovarian cancer. Fortunately, the patient was discovered early, and all preoperative evaluations were satisfactory. The strong smell of disinfectant permeated the operating room. Jiang Su was wearing a surgical mask and a sterile cap, with only a pair of eyes exposed on his entire face. Today's operating room is unusually silent. From entering the operating room to now, except for the necessary instructions, Jiang Su has not said a word that is superfluous. Yu Sang followed him as his assistant. He watched Jiang Su's expression carefully, his heart pounding. The patient's condition after the abdominal cavity exploration was better than expected by the previous examinations. There was almost no invasion and metastasis, and the lesion was not difficult to remove. The originally arranged operation plan can be carried out normally, which should make people feel relaxed, but Jiang Su looked at the laparoscopic field of view sinking like water, and Yu Sang couldn't help but wonder if he missed some details. But apparently not. The operation was surprisingly smooth. Jiang Su's technique was as neat and clean as ever. After completing the removal of the lesion and the surrounding lymph nodes, he handed over the operating table to Yu Sang for stitching as usual. He changed the contaminated gloves and stepped back to watch Yu Sang's operation. When he was not busy, Jiang Su had been very strict with the students, and Jiang Su could see the slightest confusion or the intention to make mistakes, and stopped him in time. So every time a new young doctor follows Jiang Su to perform an operation, he will be extremely nervous. The good thing is that Sang has become more and more familiar with the operation, and now he has started to complete some less difficult operations independently under the supervision of Jiang Su, so he is not as afraid of him as before. But today's Jiang Su really made him feel a little scared. Yu Sang's eyelids twitched violently, and he always felt that something bad would happen today. But it turned out that his hunch was right. When the suture was halfway done, the sensor light in the operating room came on, and an unexpected visitor wandered in, and when Yu Sang raised his head, he bumped into those familiar peach blossom eyes. At the same time, he felt that the air around him seemed to freeze. It was clearly in the warm spring of April, but there seemed to be a layer of frost around Jiang Su, which made Yu Sang feel chills down his spine. The operating room is a relatively sterile environment, and doctors and nurses are generally not strictly prohibited from visiting. In the past, there were twins who were cut out and were shown off by nurses all over the floor. However, this was the first time that Shen Fengyu came to visit when Zhonglan was not around. Morning, Dr. Jiang. Shen Fengyu also changed into his surgical gown, but he hadn't put on the sterile gown yet, so he probably stopped by on his way to the operating room next door. The students who followed Jiang Su for the operation today were all students from his group. Everyone knew that these two people were not good at dealing with each other, especially today Jiang Su was extremely depressed, so apart from a few nurses who even talked to Shen Fengyu, no one dared to talk to Shen Fengyu. But the mountain is not just me, I go to the mountain. Shen Fengyu walked directly to Jiang Su's side and stared at him inexplicably. Jiang Su was watching Yu Sang's operation, leaving only a profile for Shen Fengyu, but Shen Fangyu's feet seemed to have grown roots here, and he didn't move. His eyes seemed to fall on Jiangsu's face, until the tips of his ears turned red. "What are you looking at?" Jiangsu finally couldn't bear it. Shen Fangyu blinked. "Look at you." Jiangsu took a deep look at him, but turned his head and called Yu Sang. Yu Sang was trembling, always feeling that something was wrong. He didn't even dare to call Brother Su on weekdays, and said honestly, "What's wrong, Mr. Jiang?" Jiangsu's eyes seemed to fall on the various types of scalpels neatly placed, as if he was carefully selecting, and the lenses reflected the light of silver-white metal. "Do you know that the minimum sentence for manslaughter is how many years?" Jiangsu usually doesn't embarrass himself, he prefers to solve the people and things that embarrass him directly. "Mr. Jiang, we don't want to do this," Yu Sang persuaded while being surprised. For no reason, Shen Fangyu suddenly felt his neck was a little cold. The only remaining desire to survive made a picture pop up in his mind. A child held up a big warning sign from the glass windowsill, with the words "Run" written on it. So Shen Fangyu in his knowledge of current affairs said, "You are busy, I will leave first." Jiangsu glanced at Shen Fangyu's back, anxiously suppressed the overly clear discomfort in his body, and then silently recited 3 times, "I am a good doctor, I only save people, not kill people." Finally, Shen Fangyu's face was removed from his mind. Toss out. After the operation in the evening, Jiangsu took a meal as usual and planned to eat in the rest area of the operating room. As soon as he sat down, he couldn't help but gasped in pain. He took a deep breath with his face sinking like water, and readjusted the angle very lightly and slowly, adapting to the extremely discordant pain. Finally calmed down a little, Jiangsu opened the food box, just took a few mouthfuls, and saw someone who was not afraid of death wandering around the door of the lounge from a distance. He prayed for 3 seconds that Shen Fangyu would not come in, but the sky failed. Shen Fangyu walked in to get a cup of coffee as if he was specifically against him, and sat across from Jiangsu. If it wasn't for the fact that the floors of their department were not high enough, Shen Fangyu might not be able to fall to his death, and he would have to take care of his disability for the rest of his life. Jiangsu really wanted to throw him out of the window. Jiangsu didn't understand what was going on with Shen Fangyu. He hoped that Shen Fangyu could selectively forget what happened last night like him, and treat him as an ordinary 419 target. He swore that as long as Shen Fangyu dared to say a word, he would send Shen Fangyu to see Hades. However, the lingering Shen Fangyu seemed to not notice the displeasure on his face at all, and started to stare at him with no clear meaning. Jiangsu knocked the lunch box on the table, grabbed Shen Fangyu's collar with one hand, and raised his fist. Unexpectedly, Shen Fangyu was happy. "You really have a mole under your eyes," he seemed to be talking to himself. It turns out that the details observed by the subconscious mind can only be kept in the brain for so long. It's strange to say that yesterday I had a drink with Jiangsu and dreamed about Jiangsu at night. Shen Fangyu didn't remember exactly what he dreamed about, but he only remembered that there was a mole under Jiangsu's eye. After waking up from the hotel, he went to the front desk to check out, and saw the payment record of the room fee on his mobile phone, so he took it for granted that he slept alone all night. After waking up, he always felt strange. He never seemed to care whether Jiangsu had moles under his eyes before, so when he came to the hospital, he couldn't help being curious to see if there was such a mole. However, in the operating room, Jiangsu's mask and glasses were too tightly blocked, and he refused to face him. He didn't want to entangle with Jiangsu about this matter, but he didn't expect that after working for a long time, he still couldn't forget about it. Dr. Shen was very worried about insomnia when he went back tonight, so he decided to take a good look at Jiangsu to see if he had this mole. In the end, at the risk of almost disfiguring his face, he finally saw Jiangsu's dazzling tear mole when Jiangsu couldn't help beating someone. "How did I fight? Brother Jiang, are you okay?" Disturbed by the noise here, several doctors pushed the door open one after another and came in. It turned out to be Dr. Jiang and Dr. Shen again. The apprentices of the two team leaders stood behind each other to support the stage. The atmosphere was tense, and the war was about to break out. Jiangsu glared at Shen Fengyu viciously, but finally didn't make a move. "This is a hospital, I won't fight with you. I'm off work on Saturday and go to the boxing gym, whoever doesn't come has his grandson." After finishing speaking, he directly picked up the lunch box and threw it into the trash can, and walked away. Shen Fengyu let out a toe behind him, not forgetting to add fuel to the fire. "Are you suffering from kidney deficiency or did you stay up late last night watching movies too much? The complexion is so bad." Jiangsu, whose face was covered with dark clouds, paused, and the sentence "I think you were the one who indulged too much last night" was swallowed by him, and he suddenly realized something belatedly. Shen Fengyu seemed to have forgotten what happened last night. While reversing the car, Dr. Jiang thought indifferently, "Forget it, forget it." To avoid killing people. The road home was very congested. City A, as a city where social animals and migrant workers gather, has a well-deserved reputation for the evening rush hour after get-off work, which can last from the beginning of the night to the climax of the moon. Jiangsu was blocked in the middle of the road, unable to move forward or backward. It seemed as if the whole world was against him. "It's okay," Jiangsu told himself, "it's just sleeping with Shen Fengyu, it's like being bitten by a dog, people can't understand like dogs." After repeated ideological construction, Jiangsu gave up struggling. "Okay," he admitted that the dog bite hurts a bit, and he couldn't do it for a while without being as knowledgeable as Shen Fengyu. He casually glanced out the car window, and suddenly found that next to him was the mentally retarded hell bar from yesterday. It was daytime now, and without the harsh lights, its signboard seemed less conspicuous. However, at this moment, a group of police officers were surrounding the entrance of the hell bar, as if they were whispering something. Jiangsu blocked him, and simply rolled down the window and asked, "Brother, what's going on here?" The upright policeman said seriously, "This bar is suspected of selling counterfeit alcohol, and we are counting the victims." "Jiangsu, how many years has this boss been sentenced?" "It's hard to say, the situation is quite bad, and it will take 10 years to conservatively estimate." "Good, very good." Jiangsu thought, "It's best not to come out in this life." He looked back blankly, and after a while, he knocked his head heavily on the steering wheel. Fake alcohol harms people. 2 months later. The last page was shown on the big screen in the meeting room. Shen Fengyu held a laser pointer and said with a smile, "The above is all my report. Do you have any questions?" Director Kui commented a few words, and then said to other participants, "Shen Fengyu series on uterine pseudoaneurysm after caesarean section is very good. You can say anything you want to say." Almost tacitly, everyone's eyes were focused on the figure sitting in the front. "What are you looking at me for?" Sensing the gazes from all directions, Jiangsu raised his eyes inexplicably, completely unaware of how deeply traumatic his past with Shen Fengyu had left on his colleagues. "Dr. Jiang, do you have nothing to say?" The attending doctor next to Jiangsu poked him, but stopped talking. Every time Shen Fengyu or Jiangsu gave a report, the two of them would be able to ask each other a bunch of questions in an orderly manner. If they didn't thoroughly understand the cases or documents they were talking about, they wouldn't be able to withstand the opponent's attack at all. So today everyone tacitly agreed that today will be another long meeting. However, Jiangsu just changed his pen, and then said to Shen Fengyu, "Last Thursday in City C, a case of pseudoaneurysm after caesarean section with double uterus and double was reported. You can add it." After speaking, he closed the notebook and clamped the pen on it, as if he had nothing to say. Even Shen Fengyu on the stage was puzzled. Director Kui glanced at Jiangsu, and then said, "Then today's meeting will end here, and there is one more thing, the H Province Academic Exchange Conference that everyone is paying attention to." Her eyes flicked back and forth between Jiangsu and Shen Fengyu. Finally, he settled on Shen Fengyu's face. "Fengyu, prepare well and bring a few people with me. After the meeting, Director Kui was the first to go out every time. As soon as she left, the meeting room became lively instantly. The meeting mentioned by Director Kui is regarded as the top academic exchange meeting of obstetrics and gynecology. Almost all countries and fields will come to exchange ideas. This year, H province will be the sponsor, and a medical university also received reports from participants. Invitation letter. You and Dr. Jiang have been arguing for a long time about this meeting. I remember that you both applied to the director 2 months ago. Shen Fengyu's friends and students were overjoyed. On the one hand, they were happy for Shen Fengyu, and on the other hand, they had more opportunities to go. Shen Fengyu's selection of people must be in his own group. I'll make your coffee tomorrow morning, Shen Fengyu said to the people in his team, remember to come to my office to get it. Then he tapped Jiangsu's desktop lightly, raised his eyebrows and said, then I'll go. Hey. Jiangsu didn't want to talk to him at all. He went out with the folder. Yu Sang hurriedly followed him. Cheers came from behind. Yu Sang rolled his eyes. What's so embarrassing? Last year Director Kui brought it as reasonable for us to take them this year. However, after he finished speaking, he still said to Jiangsu, Brother Jiang, I think you are not in a good state recently. He originally wanted to say that even Director Kui could see it a little bit. Jiangsu didn't know what was wrong with him. At first, he was lethargic. As long as he was free, he could fall asleep standing up. Later, he suffered from loss of appetite. Later, I even went to a psychiatric department, fearing that I might be suffering from anorexia. However, the inspection results showed that there was no problem. Although it is common for Jiangsu to stay up all night and have a disordered diet due to his occupation, he has always paid great attention to any abnormal symptoms in his body. Dr. Jiang's motto is that as long as the diagnosis is detected early enough, there is no incurable disease. He had no appetite and always felt tired. At first he was able to keep drinking coffee to refresh himself, but later he felt sick when he smelled the coffee. Except when he was having surgery and seeing patients, he could still rely on steely will and dedication to keep going. He stayed calm and sober, but at other times he was sick and unable to get up. Especially every time he comes home from get off work, if he is not on the night shift, he doesn't even want to eat dinner, and he can fall asleep as soon as he returns, and he won't wake up halfway. This kind of disease with strange symptoms but no cause can be found out. It is especially easy to run to two extremes. Either there is nothing wrong with it, or it is a serious illness that cannot be cured. Although Jiangsu didn't want to live too pessimistically, he still couldn't avoid his thoughts from being terminally ill, and he didn't even bother to hate Shen Fengyu with him. If in the last few months of his life, he actually wasted most of his time with Shen Fengyu quarreling or fighting, Jiangsu thought, he must die with peace. But in life, there are always people who are happy and others who are sad. When he was about to leave work, an attending doctor who was a few years older than them was suddenly happy. He looked around with his mobile phone, and then said to everyone in the office, tonight, everyone will be happy. Don't go back in a hurry, I'll invite McDonald's to let those next door eat together in the lounge, and those on duty tell me what they want to eat, and I'll buy it for them and send them to their seats. Angkor, is there a happy event? Shen Fengyu asked. Wu Rui used to be a student of Medical University A. He was Shen Fengyu's and Jiangsu's seniors and their seniors. Although he was not as fast as the two kings in judging professional titles, he was patient. He and Jiangsu have a good relationship with him. Temporary confidentiality, Wu Rui smiled so hard that he could hardly see his eyes. I'll tell you later. He took out his mobile phone and started ordering after he finished speaking, tell me what you want to eat. After passing this village, you will be able to eat quickly. This store is no longer there. Doctors are physical labor, especially when they perform surgery, they often stand for several hours without eating or drinking, so they especially like fried chicken cola, which is a junk food with heavy salt, heavy oil and high energy. Wu Rui patted Jiang Su on the shoulder, and the latter woke up suddenly. Wu Rui didn't know that he was sleepy, and thought it was because he didn't want to have dinner with Shen Fengyu, so he smiled kindly, "Give me some face, don't quarrel today." Jiang Su stared for a while, then remembered that they were discussing about eating just now, and he didn't know what was going on. He just distracted for a while, and then fell asleep again as if he had been possessed by a demon. Although he really didn't want to see Shen Fengyu, but Wu Rui was a good man, and he would not refuse a senior brother who spoke so sincerely. "Okay, senior brother, I promise as long as he doesn't recruit me." Wu Rui thought, this might be a bit difficult. He glanced at Shen Fengyu, who was talking and ordering with a smile with the people around him. He was handsome, but it was a pity that he opened his mouth. Moreover, Dr. Shen is usually not angry with others. He just stares at Jiang Su's popularity. He is very sweet to others, and he doesn't know what he is thinking. There were a lot of people at this dinner party, and several people went there just to get takeout. They took what was given to the doctor on duty first, and then put the rest in the lounge. The red boxes were all over the table. The golden yellow fried chicken and grilled wings are paired with refreshing soda cola. The rich aroma permeates the lounge, making people move their index fingers. Shen Fengyu was sitting next to Wu Rui. He unceremoniously took out a fried chicken leg from the red paper bag in front of him. The crispy skin matched the tender chicken. He took a bite and asked Wu Rui, "So what is the good news?" Wu Rui smiled mysteriously, "One happy thing, my wife is pregnant." Wow, a stone stirs up 1,000 waves. This group of doctors who have been bored for a long time on weekdays patted the table and clapped their hands. Anyway, Jiwa Hospital has a separate building for conscience, entertainment lounge, and gym, and they are not afraid to disturb the patients and maintain the image of a doctor. Although I am used to seeing the gestation and birth of a new life, I am still happy every time I hear such news, especially from my colleagues who accompany me day and night, and that lucky little baby is also being sincerely expected to arrive in this world. Congratulations! Congratulations, Angkor! There were booing and blessings one after another. Thank you, Wu Rui rubbed his hands, his face flushed with excitement, and he accepted everyone's blessings excitedly. Jiang Su also picked up the Coke cup and respected Wu Rui. "Congratulations, senior brother," he said, "if you are too busy at ordinary times, just tell us." Jiang Su's words were seldom cold, but his thoughts were very careful, and he immediately touched Wu Rui's heart. Wu Rui glanced at him gratefully, and said to the big guys, "Actually, there are other reasons for inviting everyone to dinner today." Wu Rui was a little embarrassed to say, "My wife is also working hard, I think I can have more time accompany my wife. Things in the department in the future may cause you some trouble, so let me apologize to you guys first. This matter is actually a bit sensitive. After all, no one wants to increase their workload, but fortunately, the relationship between the departments has always been harmonious, and Wu Rui has helped everyone a lot on weekdays, so when he opened his mouth, everyone laughed, waving his hand. Don't worry, if you can't take care of it, just come to us. I'm just, hey." Wu Rui saw that his colleagues were so enthusiastic, and the atmosphere was just right. Suddenly, he couldn't help covering his face, and his voice was a little choked. "I'm usually too busy. I don't have time to spend time with her." Seeing that the atmosphere suddenly turned in a sensational direction, Shen Fengyu quickly tore apart a chicken wing and stuffed it directly into Wu Rui's mouth, then patted him on the shoulder. "It's okay, Angkor, we all understand that work is important, wife is more important, no, but right now, nothing is as important as the fried chicken in your mouth." After he finished speaking, he found Jiang Su looking at him. Sure enough, Wu Rui's sadness was suddenly interrupted by the fried chicken. His eyes were still red, but he couldn't help but burst into laughter, so while reaching out to pick up the fried chicken next to his mouth, he cursed with a smile, "Stinky boy." The banquet, which was almost an embarrassment, was restored to happiness because of a laugh. Jiang Su saw him and Shen Fangyu realized that he was looking at him. He casually looked away and commented, "The response is very fast." This is to praise him for adjusting the atmosphere. Shen Fangyu felt blessed, took another chicken wing and handed it directly to Jiang Su's mouth. The thick and greasy smell came over the face. Jiang Su took a step back suddenly, his face changed. In fact, he has felt uncomfortable since he first came in. He usually likes to eat fried chicken, but during this period of time, he feels sick to his stomach when he smells a little oily, so after eating for so long, he just drank some Coke, even ate one French fries and didn't move. However, the oily chicken wings are sticking to the tip of his nose at this moment, and the strong smell of oil and meat is sweeping over Jiang Su's vulnerable olfactory ball like a rotten one. He glanced at Shen Fangyu, then suddenly lowered his head and covered his mouth. Vomit, a suppressed retch. Dr. Jiang didn't want to be so ashamed, but he couldn't help it. He covered his mouth and went all the way to the bathroom, leaving behind Shen Fangyu who was holding the messy chicken legs. Is this his new way of insulting me? Shen Fangyu asked stiffly while holding up the chicken leg. After a while, he asked Yu Sang who was sitting next to Jiang Su, "Do I look so disgusting? You have to ask Dr. Jiang about it. Maybe you robbed him of his place to attend the meeting. He is very angry when he sees you." "Forget it, I know that those who follow Jiang Su are all like dogs, and dogs can't spit ivory out of their mouths." He silently withdrew his hand holding the chicken leg, pretending nothing happened, but Wu Rui said thoughtfully, "My daughter-in-law is also like this. She retched badly a while ago, but most of the time she couldn't vomit. We didn't think about that. I thought it was some kind of illness, but it turned out to be pregnant." Shen Fangyu thought about it, so after Jiang Su went to vomit for the third time and came back, he leaned forward and approached the weak-looking Dr. Jiang. "Jiang Su, if you vomit like this, you won't be pregnant." Var. The author has something to say, "Brother Wu, one happy thing, my wife is pregnant." Shen Fangyu, "I also have a happy event, and my wife is also damn, please don't slap someone in the face, thank you." Jiang Su, "I am your father." Shen, Fang, Yu. Jiang Su stood up directly, and turned over the chair behind him with a bang. Yu Sang lifted the chair carefully, and almost all the doctors who were chatting were frightened into silence, looking at Jiang Su and Shen Fangyu. "There won't be another fight today, right? Who told them to sit face to face? Doesn't this make up for the wounded hearts of the people?" Wu Rui glared at Shen Fangyu. He knew that sooner or later Shen Fangyu's broken mouth would cause bad things. He patted Jiang Su on the back while persuading him, calm down, calm down." He said, "It's all my fault, brother, he was just joking with you when he was telling Fang Yu about my daughter-in-law's pregnancy reaction." However, Jiang Su, who had been staring at Shen Fangyu all the time, suddenly trembled when he heard this. The four big words pregnancy reaction from Wu Rui's mouth slammed into his mind, occupying his sanity at a speed visible to the naked eye. Dizziness, fatigue, greasy aversion, nausea, and vomiting. This is a textbook-level pregnancy reaction. He is an obstetrics and gynecology doctor himself, and he is very familiar with these symptoms, but he has never thought about it before. Wu Rui was ready to persuade the fight, but he never expected that Jiang Su would sit quietly down after he tried to persuade him. Although his complexion looked a bit unwell, after all, the smoke of gunpowder was settled like this. Wu Rui glanced at him in disbelief, and suddenly said to himself, "So my eloquence is so good? You should resign and become a mediator at the police station." "Yes, Angkor is the next Nobel Peace Prize," Shen Fangyu said in a very cooperative manner. He was also a little puzzled, Jiang Su was so easy to talk about today. However, Jiang Su suddenly stood up again, when everyone thought he had thought it over or was planning to fight Shen Fangyu, he suddenly patted Yu Sang on the shoulder, and then walked out of the lounge. Yu Sang glanced at him inexplicably, and then looked at the others for help. only to find that almost all his colleagues looked at him with eyes full of encouragement and expectation, as if there was a line of big characters written, "Come on, you will definitely be able to solve a problem." War. So Yu Sang's troubled eyes gradually became firm, and finally followed Jiang Su out with his head held high and his chest full of faith, like a people's hero. Then he saw Jiang Su leaning against the wall, with one leg supporting the wall and the other leg slightly bent. He lowered his head and pressed his hand on the bridge of his nose, looking very tired. The pale light in the corridor hit him. Yu Sang suddenly found that Jiang Su had lost a lot of weight recently, and even the shirt he was wearing seemed empty. Seeing him coming, Jiang Su beckoned, and when he approached, he lowered his voice and asked, if a patient had 2 months ago, and now he has nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, fatigue, dizziness, what is it? Reason. Yu Sang has long been used to Jiang Su checking his test sites anytime and anywhere, but he was a little surprised that the question was so basic. Even though it was strange, he still blurted out, "I'm pregnant." Jiang Su took a deep breath, as if trying to suppress some kind of impulse, and continued to ask, "Then what if this patient is a man? This question is a bit out of line." "How about," Yu Sang said tentatively, "go check the HCG too." Jiang Su. Yu Sang was convinced that after he finished speaking, Jiang Su showed an expression that he was going to throw him into the sea to feed the sharks in the next second, so Guangsu changed his words, "I just said it casually, it may be a digestive tract disease." Jiang Su frowned, waved at him and said, "Tell them I'm not feeling well, so I'll go back first." Oh! Yu Sang watched Jiang Su leave in a daze. He has followed Jiang Su for many years, and it was the first time he saw Jiang Su showing such an expression. He looked at Jiang Su's thin back, as if he could be blown away by a gust of wind, and suddenly wanted to persuade him to eat more and not work so hard. However, obstetrics and gynecology doctors are the same as surgeons. Because of the many operations, they travel all year round and walk very fast, as if rushing to reincarnate. Therefore, when he wanted to speak out, Jiang Su had already walked away. He sighed, walked back to the lounge. Everyone was still having dinner, and the office was empty. Jiang Su stared at the documents on the computer in a daze. After 10 minutes, he was still reading the first line. He turned off the computer a little annoyed, and got ready to get off work. It was getting dark outside, and when I looked up, I could still see the moon. There is a tall camphor tree outside the department, and there is a bird's nest deep in the branches of the camphor tree. The mother bird has just given birth to a nest of chicks, and is feeding them right now, chattering and lively. Jiang Su's eyes paused on the bird's nest, and then looked at the hospital building behind the tree. After a while, Jiang Su stopped going out and sat back in the office. He closed his eyes, as if he had made up his mind, and made a call, "Is the inspection department on duty?" His voice was very soft, like the wind at night. There was a hum on the other side, "What's the matter? Are you guys busy right now?" "Good." Jiang Su turned his work badge, and his eyes fell on himself in the photo. "I will send a urine sample up now, please help me to test an HCG. The account is on my personal account, Jiang Su, Obstetrics and Gynecology Department." It is very common for doctors in the same hospital to go through the back door, bring themselves or relatives and friends to send samples and do examinations, usually for the sake of saving money. All departments are colleagues, and they have always turned a blind eye to it. Generally, such examinations do not ask for names, do not record patient information, and directly report the results to the doctor who brought them. Although it was a little strange why Dr. Jiang had to pay for it himself, the doctor on duty in the laboratory department didn't ask any more questions, but gave him a positive answer. "The results may come out later, don't wait, get up tomorrow morning to see." Jiang Su, yes. However, tonight Jiang Su rarely fell asleep without falling asleep. He didn't want to admit that his insomnia was because he was waiting for the results of the laboratory. "I couldn't explain why, but I clearly felt it was ridiculous. As a man, even if he had symptoms similar to pregnancy reactions, he couldn't possibly be pregnant, but Jiang still couldn't sleep at all. The full name of the index he asked the laboratory to check is human chorionic gonadotropin, which is a common inspection index in early pregnancy, but even if it is really elevated, it does not necessarily mean pregnancy, and it may be due to pituitary dysfunction, or many a malignant tumor. Jiang even thought about it seriously: which one is more frustrating, cancer or pregnancy? Shen Fengyu's face appeared over and over again in his mind, even the many forgotten details of that night slowly returned to his memory. As he waited impatiently for the result, he felt that he was simply sick. A professional obstetrician and gynecologist couldn't sleep most of the night because he was wondering if a man was pregnant, and his colleagues would laugh him off if he said it. However, when the phone sounded, he still unlocked the phone abruptly and opened the file sent by the laboratory doctor. On the fresh inspection report, there is only one indicator in black and white. Jiangsu's eyes seemed to be able to burn a hole in the checklist. He stared intently at the familiar indicator and the soaring value behind him, and came to an obvious conclusion. Either the equipment is broken, or the world is crazy. He jumped out of bed almost overnight and dialed Tang Kei's phone. Half an hour later, a private obstetrics and gynecology hospital in City A. Tang Kei was yawning while preparing the ultrasound equipment. His eyes could barely open. "Why don't you sleep at night?" Tang was Jiangsu's and Shen Fengyu's college classmates. He switched to imaging when he was in different departments, and later he switched from the hospital to a private school. It is said that he can relax. The relationship between him and Jiangsu has always been very strong. Although he was called up in the middle of the night, he just complained a few words. "I may be terminally ill." Tang Kei was a little confused. "Hey." Jiangsu handed the phone to him, and the page stayed on the checklist just now. "Holy shit, such a high HCG level, your girlfriend." Tang Kei said unexpectedly, "I didn't hear you talking about falling in love. You are so fast, you have children." Jiangsu was silent for a moment, and then said to Tang Kei, "Mine." "Of course I know the baby is yours, I mean the test results," Jiangsu interrupted Tang Kei, and said with a blank expression, "It's mine." Tang Kei woke up all of a sudden, and grabbed Jiangsu's arm in disbelief. "What did you say?" His voice was raised a lot. "My dear, such a high value, this. He said this after a long time. There was no reason for this. In the end, he could only stare dumbfounded at Jiangsu lying on the examination bed with a cold face. Tang Kei reached out to get the ultrasonic gel, and said in a small voice, "It's not like you really have cancer." Jiangsu directly took the coupling agent from him, untied the belt, lifted the hem of his jacket, and looked at Tang Kei after quickly applying it. The latter was staring at Jiangsu with an ultrasound probe, with a shocked expression on his face. Forgetting how to move, Jiangsu impatiently took the sterilized probe and stuck it on his lower abdomen skin. Although he is not a professional imaging doctor, he is still very proficient in basic abdominal ultrasound. Tang Kei also knew that he would, so he didn't bother him. Now his mind is still full of the abnormal detection index, while worrying about Jiang. Not long after his fate was told, he didn't even dare to look at the screen of the inspection instrument. After a long time of mental construction, he covered his eyes with his hands, showing a slit, and carefully glanced at the screen of the inspection instrument. But looking at it, he was suddenly dumbfounded. "Fuck! Shut up!" Jiangsu tightened his jaw, and looked away from the black and white screen with a blank expression. After a long time, he lowered his head stiffly and looked at his still flat belly. Since he hadn't been exposed to the sun much, his waist and belly were all white. Because of regular exercise, he has always had abdominal muscles, but he didn't know if it was his illusion. He actually felt that the lines of the abdominal muscles seemed to have a slight tendency to disappear. The coolant still remained on the lower abdomen, sticky and slippery, cold, stimulating Jiang Su's senses and brain. Jiang Su's extremely stable surgical hands, trained through years of surgery, were trembling imperceptibly at this moment, revealing his restless heart. It was as if something had fallen to the ground in his heart. No, it was all the tall buildings in his heart, the world view he had lived for so many years, and all the experiences he had accumulated from all the books he had memorized, all collapsed into ruins at the same time. Not a tumor, not cancer. The echoes of the gestational sac, fetal heart, and fetal buds are complete, and there are many of them. They are the results of early pregnancy imaging examinations at the textbook level. Jiang Su used to be only mildly myopic, but now, he thinks he might be blind. Jiang Su. Tang Kei's jaw almost dropped from shock. He held the toilet paper and stammered, "You, give me an explanation." Jiang Su took out a few pieces of toilet paper to wipe off the remaining coolant, then put down his clothes, and sat up while buckling his belt. "I would like you to give me an explanation. Kei Tang specializes in reproductive medicine and developmental biology." He held out his hand to Tang Kei, paper and pen. Tang Kei hurriedly took out a pen and a post-it note from his pocket and handed them to him. Jiang Su's handwriting was very scribbled, and he quickly wrote a series of checkups. "I have surgery these 2 days, come here for a checkup on Sunday morning, help me arrange for these inspections. It is best to finish them in the morning, and you can add money." "Hey, let me tell you, it's not." Tang Kei looked at the instrument and then at Jiang Su. "Are you still thinking about going to work after this?" Jiang Su glanced at him. "Understood, it's just that Shen Fangyu is going on and you are going on and on. It's been so many years since you graduated, why are you two still so clumsy?" As their classmate and Jiang Su's roommate, Tang Kei knew the grievances between the two of them very well. "Wouldn't it be nice to shake hands and talk to it?" Tang Kei said, "I still remember the third place in the class before, a very pretty girl, who was dazed by the two of you, and then she just lay down and stayed there with peace of mind. Number 3, never competed for number 1 again." He didn't know how to deal with the results of the ultrasound, so he could only change the subject crazily to avoid the embarrassment of having nothing to say. At that time she was joking, saying that it would be great if you fell in love with Shen Fangyu. In this way, you both spend time on exams for affection, and she might still be able to take the first place in the exam. Ha, ha ha. After he finished speaking, he deliberately laughed twice, but Jiang Su still had no expression on his face. He was very worried whether Jiang Su had become stupid. "Brother Su, you have to be strong." Tang Kei held his arm, and decided to stimulate him with the thing that this person cares most about. "If you are crazy, it will be easy for Shen Fangyu. Think about it, from now on, the obstetrics and gynecology department of Jiwa Hospital will be controlled by him alone. Can you bear him running rampant in your territory every day?" Hearing Shen Fangyu's name, Jiang Su's eyelids finally twitched, showing a slight reaction. Thank God! Just when Tang Kei was rejoicing that Jiang Su hadn't been stimulated to the point of dementia, the latter suddenly said 2 words, "Stupid." "Tang Kei. It's not about you." Jiang Su handed back the post-it note and the pen to Tang Kei. "You worked hard today, and I'll treat you to dinner after the inspection on Sunday." He put on his coat and added with a dazed expression, "Don't ask anything until the final full set of inspection results come out." The author has something to say. Note: HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin coolant. It is used to exclude the air between the probe and the measured object during ultrasonic inspection, increasing lubrication and facilitating deployment. Sunday evening. Jiang Su sat in Tang Kei's office, his legs crossed, and he was still wearing a meticulous grey and white striped shirt. In front of him was a large pile of inspection reports, but the names were blurred out. It can be seen that his mentality has stabilized a lot. It's just. Tang Kei always felt that he didn't look like he was thinking about it, but rather like a patient who was diagnosed with a terminal illness and calmed down. However, what should be said still has to be said. The situation is like this: the malignant tumors have been ruled out, and you do have a gestational sac in your stomach, about 2 months old. Tang Ke said, I told you when I had the color Doppler ultrasound this morning. My speculation, now combined with other inspection results, I think it should be correct. He gestured and said, it should be because of the mutation of mesoderm cell development, the mesonephric paratube has not completely apoptotic degeneration, and the uterus and bilateral appendages have abnormally developed in your body cavity, and there is a thin section between the cervix and the intestinal tract. I preliminarily guessed that it was due to the adhesion between the sinus nodules on the back wall of the urogenital sinus and the wall of the original bowel. Tang Ke frowned slightly and said, according to the examination results, it should be almost exactly 2 to 3 months ago that the uterus and bilateral appendages in your body began to become active. Regardless of whether you want this child or not, hysterectomy and bilateral adnexectomy have to be done. This set of things should not grow in your body. If the nonsteroidal hormones are disordered, it will be troublesome. He spread his hands and said, I don't need to say this, you are a doctor and you know best. Jiang read the inspection reports one by one, clasped his hands and leaned on Tang Ke's desk. Are you planning to give birth? Tang Ke asked. Jiang stared at the mahogany desk for a while, as if he was letting go. I do not want. Tang Ke nodded to express his understanding. Although Jiang mind has always seemed to be very strong, he is a man after all. Just accepting the matter of pregnancy may consume a lot of his mental energy. It is normal not to have this child. Can you work out how old this kid is? He asked. Although ultrasound can also guess roughly according to the size, it is not accurate. 65 days, Jiang didn't need to think too much, he just checked the calendar and knew, it's more than 49 days, and he can't do medical abortion. He has already calculated it himself. Tang Ke was a little surprised, you and your boyfriend's life is not harmonious. With the more impactful thing of pregnancy in front, he quickly accepted the fact that Jiang partner was a man. The fact that he could push back the time so quickly could only mean that it happened only once during that time. Jiang didn't pick up his words, the diameter of the soft catheter is less than 0.5 centimeters, and the intersection angle with the intestine is too small, so negative pressure aspiration can't be done. He has already gone through all kinds of surgical procedures in his mind, and he knows better than anyone else, it can only be performed by laparoscopy or laparotomy. Tang Ke nodded, we can still use laparoscopy now, but in a few months we will only have to open the abdomen. He does not perform surgery, but he also knows that there are many sequelae and risks of laparotomy. Under the epidemic situation, laparotomy is considered a relatively large operation, and the impact on the body is not small. But I have some good news, Tang Ke said, I've been in a lot of turmoil because of you these past 2 days. I asked my friends, and I found out something. Tang Ke took out the tablet and ordered something, and handed it to Jiang. I have a friend who works as an editor for a foreign journal. Last month, there was an article that was submitted to the same situation as yours. The author is from M country, and the article has not yet been published. It is difficult for him to send it to me now, but I have the author's contact information. If you need it, you can send him an email to see if he can help. But his patient gave birth to the child, and he performed an open caesarean section, and the father and son are safe. Jiang's eyelashes trembled. As Tang Ke said, this is indeed good news. There is a case that can be referred to. Compared with no records at all, it sounds like a drop in the bucket, and it is better than nothing, but it is two completely different concepts for doctors. Although the operation sounds like it can be repaired wherever it is broken, Jiang knew in his heart that every type of operation he performed was observed countless times with his predecessors, he was familiar with all the steps, and he knew the structure of the human body fluently. Dare to get started under the supervision of the teacher until you are proficient. He dares to challenge, but cannot take risks. Surgical operations have developed for 200 years, during which countless lives were piled up in vain, and the blood of patients was sprinkled, which made the surgical technology enter the current mature state. Pioneering is often accompanied by sacrifice, so for most doctors in the world today, medical skills are more a process of inheritance and learning than pioneering. Under the premise of sufficient auxiliary supporting data, new treatments can be developed step by step, but no one dares to rashly try a groundbreaking new operation. But male childbirth is an unprecedented operation. Except for the case in country M, there is nothing related to it in the past classics and documents, and the incidence rate is lower than the rarest rare disease. During the operation, not only the child must be removed, but also the uterus and bilateral appendages must be removed at the same time. The problem is that this is still a man's body. It is hard to imagine how complicated the blood vessels and tissues inside the abdominal cavity are after opening. No experience means huge risks. Jiang, if you decide to take it away, I think the safest thing to do is to contact Dr. Ken, the surgeon who wrote the article. After all, he has done full-term surgery and has some experience, but now the visa to country M is not enough. It's so easy to handle, you can afford it, but the kids can't. The international situation is not too clear, now it will pass, conservatively estimated that it will have to wait at least 3 months, at that time, the fetus will be 5 months old. 5 months. It has a memory, and can even distinguish the voice of the gestator. Tang Ke paused. Actually, I think that if you have a good relationship with your partner, it's not that you can't conceive for a while to see how things go. It's also fate. So many couples don't want a child of their own, he said. Say, this way you have at least 8 months to contact the doctor to prepare for the operation, and it will be less stressful. Jiang folded his hands in front of his knees. I still prefer to do it now. Tang Ke sighed. The problem is that if you want to open it now, who will perform the operation on you? He paused and said, who in China would dare to perform such an operation on you? Everyone has never done it before, and they have no idea in their hearts. No one dares to gamble with their careers and Jiang's life. If we can get the operation video, we may be able to find someone, Jiang said. That depends on how much the doctor in country M is willing to share, Tang Ke said. After all, no one in the world has performed this kind of surgery except him. Actually, there are. Jiang said suddenly, but there was no more words.